3-Minute Fabians. What's this all about? The idea actually stems from the University of Queensland, where PhD students have to talk about their PhD topics in 3 minutes or less to a lay audience. So we thought we'd give this idea a go with the Fabians and see if people had policy and campaign pitches. I will have a timer and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left. And then at 3 minutes, we cut you off. We are going to be ruthless.
I want to tell you about how the Howard government created a foreign-owned monopoly through privatisation of a national asset, creating a gift that continues to give to the Canada Pension Investment Fund. In 1998, the coalition government introduced the National Transmission Sales Act, which, without any public consultation and little opposition, resulted in the sale of the National Transmission Network. The NTN was operated by the government from over 600 sites on Crown land throughout Australia, providing ABC, SBS, not-for-profit radio services, emergency services, and community broadcasting to 99% of the Australian population. The whole operation included vast tracts of Crown land and public infrastructure, was sold to a private broadcasting group for a measly $650 million. The purpose? To reduce public debt. The network and the land upon which the towers are located has since been on-sold to BAI Communications, which is 86% owned by the Canadian Pension Investment Fund, and was recently placed on the market to sell 774 towers around Australia for $2 billion. It was described as Australia's preeminent independent communications infrastructure provider, operating across broadcast, TV and radio, communications and government. It didn't mention the bonanza that the sale of the land was yielding. Why do we care? The Hammersley Broadcasting Tower in Erindale Road, owned by BAI, is on 43 hectares of increasingly rare Bankshire and Tuart woodland, and BAI wants to clear and sell 13 hectares of it for housing. It has applied to the EPA for a permit to clear this bushland, which is a threatened ecological community on the Swan Coastal Plain under federal and state legislation. No survey has been carried out to assess the importance of the bushland to traditional owners. Perth's tree canopy is less than 20% and declining, the lowest of all capital cities. With trees rapidly disappearing, all remaining native bush in the metropolitan area must be protected. The profitable monopoly resulting from privatisation of this critical communication infrastructure predicts a profit of $345 million in the next financial year for the Canada Pension Fund. And this doesn't include the sale of its surplus land at huge profit. The sale of previously publicly owned land is providing a windfall for its foreign owners and is proving to be an environmental disaster for local communities.
We have our first video up from Michael Haynes. Michael's going to be talking about a universal income.
Once, every human lived off the land, but since the advent of money, property rights and paid work, everyone needs money to survive. However, only around 50% of the population at any time can do paid work. The rest are too young, they're sick, injured, disabled or aged, or have to care for dependents without pay, or they're between jobs. And this is an ever-changing group. That the percentage in poverty has remained around 12 to 14% of the population, despite the turnover in people and decades of growth, indicates it is a system problem. The problem is that if welfare is too high, it's rational to take the benefit in lieu of a low-paid job, and this forces the government to keep benefits below the poverty line to compel those who can work to take the available jobs. This has the unfortunate side effect of forcing those who cannot work and who have no savings or family support into poverty. A universal basic income solves this system problem by providing a floor below which no one can fall. Hundreds of pilots from around the world over the last 50 years show that when people have sufficient money to survive, they spend both their time and their money wisely. And when they can take on paid work, they do so to better themselves and their family. Basic Income Australia has devised a unique approach to a UBI. It ensures that everyone has the cash they require to signal their needs to the market. Without this money, their basic needs go unmet and business misses out on the sales of food, clothing and other necessities. It's good for no one. The UBI would not require any change in taxes. Instead, it would be paid out of new money with its own tax regime. Everyone would get a pay slip from their current employer showing their current tax, but a second pay slip would show the UBI less the tax deducted based on income they earn, and above a certain level, the UBI would be taxed at 100%. This ensures that the net benefit goes to those who need it most. As well, the UBI would be set off against any welfare, saving both the benefit and the administration cost. In addition to these recoveries, there will be other offsets that reduce the net inflow of new money to a level that is not inflationary. It will also be phased in over 5 to 6 years to allow the supply chain time to adapt without inflation. We recognise it's not a silver bullet, as we still need the government to provide health, housing and other public services, as well as perhaps a job guarantee for those who can work. Its primary aim is to eliminate systemic poverty, but as well, it can be used to help balance the labour market. As people lose work to automation, virtualisation and artificial intelligence, the rate can be raised, and as it rises, some people will choose to cut back their hours or drop out of paid work altogether. At some point, most jobs will be filled in a reasonable time, while those who want paid work will have a job, with the rest doing other things with their life as they choose. A UBI is the epitome of democracy and economic efficiency.
Before I forget, we will be voting on the best presentation today, and the winner will receive a copy of Australian Fabians, A Brief History. Quite often the average age of a Fabians event can be a little high, but we have a younger member today who will be bringing that average down quite a lot. So I'd like to introduce Franny, who's an 11-year-old, and she's going to be speaking on a topic she's been passionate about for 3 years, which is on the issue of owls and rat poison.
Hi, my name's Franny, and I'm here to talk about second-generation rat poisoning and getting it off shelves. To protect our local wildlife and the owls, we found an owl walking one day, and it was during the daytime, and I know that owls are nocturnal. So we took the owl to the wildlife sanctuary, and they said it was probably rat poisoning. We did a little bit of research and realized that this is a big problem, and we decided to do something about it. We wrote a letter to Bunnings and took it to the Bunnings headquarters, and they said that they would do a lot to help. Now they've only done a little bit, but they are moving in the right direction. We also spoke to the State Minister of Environment, and they were quite interested as well. We don't want ordinary people to be able to buy second-generation rat poisoning at Bunnings, because second-generation rat poisoning hurts our local wildlife. This needs to change. We want to change the poison schedule. I think lots of people are interested in saving the owls. If you have the opportunity to support saving the owls or the poison schedule, please do. Our goal is to get second-generation rat poisoning off shelves. Thank you for listening.
Our next presenter is going to be Nicole, who has a personal story about getting involved in politics and how she's now been inspired to get others involved as well. So can everyone please welcome Nicole?
So as a kid, my dad would constantly be fighting with my grandma about politics, and this political Hum was basically the soundtrack to my youth. So by the time I was ready to turn 18, while my friends were all excited about being able to drink legally for the first time, I was excited about voting out Richard Port. And we did. But that was basically the extent of my political capital. Basically, that's as far as it stretched, to the ballot box. So fast forward to 2015, I had a squidgy little baby. I had a 4-year-old, and my marriage of 11 years had just gone tits up. And that was the same year that my grandma passed away. And sitting at my grandma's funeral with my squidgy little baby on my lap, I thought, while I was listening to people talk about her lifetime of volunteering, that I would love for my squidgy little baby to look back on my life and be proud of me like I was of my grandma. And I also realized that I no longer wanted or was willing to sell the days of my life to an organization for the benefit of shareholders. I knew that education was my way out of this scenario, and I enrolled in a social science discipline, and I sat for 12 months listening to people talk about amazing systemic interventions, programs and policies, which were then shut down by lack of political will, by a change of government, by lack of funding. And it was in that time that I realized that good government, good governance, and good politics really underpins a good society. A couple of years later, I was lucky enough to meet some people who then became my political role models, and I got involved with politics. Last year, I became the vice president of my local ALP branch, and I was elected to my union branch committee. So this is my personal story, but it's also an invitation to anyone who might feel like they want to get more engaged with a particular purpose. And to those people who are the role models amongst us, to know that even though you might not be able to quantify the impact that you're having on others, that you are having an impact more than you could possibly know. If you would like to develop your own personal story, hit up Phil later, or come and talk to me. We'll be doing some training for the upcoming election campaign very shortly.
Wave at everybody on the Zoom, everybody. That's us in the pub. We're soon to have sausage rolls and other nibblies. Sorry you can't join in.
Hello, my name is Carl Gopalkrishnan and I'm in Perth, Western Australia. And this is my 3-minute policy pitch. I want to raise the problem of multicultural, multi-faith migrant young carers across Australia who provide unpaid family care, language translating and other cultural supports. They're hard to identify because they provide this help as part of their cultural values. Without them, the NDIS and Aged Care Acts just wouldn't work for multicultural families. They're highly undervalued. Most of my knowledge of this comes from working as a multicultural and social cohesion policy advocate in WA and Victoria over many years. I've also spoken with multicultural peak organisations and directly with many multicultural young people about this. These carers, especially from low-income diverse families in their first 5 years in Australia, don't always benefit from parenting allowance support. And that includes other sort of supports from local council and state governments. And it's important to note that their cultural barriers to employment, apart from their youth, is significant. Multicultural kids often miss out on outside school activities such as sporting clubs, tutoring, entertainment, and even food sometimes when families have extended family and use overseas remittances to send money back home. The pressures of being a young carer can make young people more vulnerable to mental health issues, disengaging from family, and a host of complex social cohesion risks. Young carers are potentially the answer to the government's failing translating and interpreting service, or TIS, which has a very low uptake across all government services and communities. There is a workforce crisis in finding new translators and interpreters. At the same time, language teaching in schools is in decline. My proposed solution is to first recognise that young carers within diverse communities already provide and will continue to provide support to aged, disability, mental health and non-English speaking family members in Australia. We need to provide a supplement, not necessarily in wages, but by subsidising their activities that they're missing out on from their 24/7 family carer roles. Also, they save state and federal governments a lot of money and ensure those services don't make really big mistakes. And that's a heavy burden on a young person, and it's very unfair. I want to see diverse young carers nurtured as a possible homegrown interpreting and translating workforce. I want to see youth education and employment programs that factor in culture and family care roles. I'd like to see diverse young people have more positive expectations of work and to value what they bring to their families, their own community, and the wider community in general. I especially want to see them happily occupied so that they don't become more vulnerable just because they have great civic values. And that's the end of my 3-minute pitch. Thank you very much to the Fabians.
Next up in the room, we have Eleanor, and she's going to be talking about mechanism and safe space for communication. So let's welcome Eleanor, everyone.
Hi, my name's Eleanor, and I'm here as a person who's concerned about an horrendous life experience relating to ill health. However, I am a community development worker, and I can see lots of opportunity to address issues that I've experienced and lots of other people have experienced as well. But I think key to that is communication, and it's just lacking. Really, the whole system is about you do as you're told, you follow through the process, and if it damages you or you can't fulfill those requirements, then you are punitively damaged, and it's brutal, and I've been through that myself. The communication, I think, is key. At the moment, the structure doesn't allow it. It's really based on directorships and CEOs, and there's no democratic facility in that structure for the people that are served. And so it's very exploitative. I would love to have a communication system. I would love it to be, I'm looking for 3 people to facilitate that. It's bottom up, it's based on human rights and social justice and about being heard. It's about being articulate. It's about articulating what the problem is. And that involves the inclusion of people who at the moment are silenced. For example, Aboriginal community, disabled people, women who are sexually abused and domestic violence are silenced. And although there is some stuff that comes out, the actual reality of what's happening in the lives, the knowledge of people who are experiencing that is not examined. Pardon?
1 minute.
1 minute. Mm-hmm. So to facilitate the establishment of that communication, and it's about addressing inequality. Inequality is just appalling. The system we have of charities really goes back to the poorhouse. This is my area of expertise. I have a degree in women's studies, and I've just delved into this to a huge degree. And I think that we need to articulate that that's a problem, but in reality and in actual facts. So there's so much more I could say about this community development, bottom up, communication, voices articulating their knowledge that they've gained through lived experience, addressing inequality, universal basic income, home ownership, etc.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker from the audience is Remco. And I think his talk can possibly be best defined as the journey towards fixing Australia. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, my name is Remco, and I had the great privilege of working for the Industries Assistance Commission, which probably nobody has heard of, in the 80s, and is now the Productivity Commission. And when I was there as an economist, I got this profound feeling that something is wrong in this country. And gradually over the years after I've left, it's been growing on me ever since. The problem is, Australia is the best place in the world to live. And that is a problem. because Mancur Olson, in The Rise and Decline of Nations, which is regarded as a sort of a statement, a tome, showed that in the change and necessary change that a country needs does not happen when things are comfortable. Do you remember Lange and Douglas, Prime Minister Lange in New Zealand? Well, when England, Great Britain, joined the European community, New Zealand lost its market. And so they cleaned up the country, that pair. They're not very popular sometimes, but it was necessary. Now, the problem is, as I said, Australia is in a good place, and I like to be positive. I like to present opportunities, but it's not going to happen if you're all feeling comfortable, because Australia is looking at an abyss, and I'm worried about, not me, I'm fine. My children are fine. I'm worried about my grandkids. You know, the Australia Institute, for example, showed that 90% of the wealth is going to just 10% of Australians. It used to be 10% to 10%. We had 30% of our GDP was manufacturing. Today, it's just 6%. Even the service economy of the United States has 12, double. Germany has 18, treble. We've lost 80% of our manufacturing. Nobody talks about it. Our exports. Did you know that our exports, the intellect component of our exports, was determined by the Harvard University? Whoa, I've got so much to say. Oh, no. Anyway, look, it ranks us between Pakistan and Morocco. We are claimed to have a skills shortage, and we're bringing in immigrants. Now, I'm an immigrant, and I'm not going to present myself as an anti-immigrant. However, it is an inconvenient truth. Remember Al Gore had an inconvenient truth? Well, I'll have to leave just with this thought. There's an inconvenient truth that the growth of GDP is faster than the per capita GDP. Now, if you can think about what that means, is that we are diluting our wealth. This is not an anti-immigration. I'm for truth. And we need to look beyond the rhetoric. And that is why I guess I have to wind up with that. There's so much more I'd like to say. But, I'm looking forward to a new Australia, and I have, some proposals we could talk about another time. But thank you for listening.
David, your hand? Yeah.
Do you want to introduce that?
Yes.
It's on.
On YouTube, yeah.
David.
Okay, so he's raised some very interesting ideas, which I'm sure I will arm wrestle with him over a drink later on.
Greetings, friends. I have a fourfold campaign that ties together to help make our communities more peaceful, more free, more stable, more harmonious, and importantly, more responsive and responsible. The four elements are: number one, annual general elections for all elected legislatures. Number two, lower the voting age to 14 or 15 so that our children will not only be taught civics while still in our compulsory education system, but can also experience the realities of our sacred secret ballot. Number three, much higher public funding for electioneering. The current federal election funding rate is $3.30 per vote. I would be happy to see this increase at least tenfold to over $30 per vote. This would give pause for us all to think carefully who we are marking as the number one on our ballot papers. Importantly, it would also give candidates and parties more resources to get their message out, and possibly to jump the gatekeepers of information such as Murdoch, Zuckerberg, and others. There may even be funds left over to assist their volunteers and scrutineers at the various polling places. Number 4, where there are upper houses, such as our Australian Senate or our own Western Australian Legislative Council, the members shall be selected via sortition, like jury duty. This would be for a 2-year period, with half the members retiring each year at the time of the election for the lower house. This would allow some mentoring and fostering of lead facilitators within the chamber, whilst also essentially smashing the party system for our so-called House of Review. There is much to take in here. I am happy to enter into dialogue and debate about these matters. Post a comment on my YouTube channel or chat with me about this when you see me. Thank you.
We're going to have Tim Diamond next.
I'm going to talk about another organisation outside of Fabians, which is, of course, violating the rule of getting you to say you should all join the Fabians, which you definitely should. But what you should also think about is a organisation that I have been involved in, arguably a campaign for my entire life, which is, or at least my entire career in the union movement, which is an organisation called Union Aid Abroad, AFIDA. Now, AFIDA stands for Australian People for Health, Education and Development Abroad. It's not my favourite acronym, but it does at least describe what it does, because what it is the Australian trade union movement's overseas aid organisation. But I'm going to argue that it shouldn't be seen as just a question of aid. It shouldn't, because aid implies charity. What it should be seen as is an opportunity to exercise, to push the boundaries of global justice for workers right around the world and for people who are in difficult and desperate situations all around the world. And you do that through the mechanism of solidarity. Solidarity is a union value. It's also unions in practice. It's also what unions practice. And should you choose to become a member, because it is a membership-based organisation, a member of Union Aid Abroad, AFIDA, you will be assisting not to pay for union bureaucrats such as myself to get money, but what you will be actually doing is supporting what is partner organisations that AFIDA has all around the world. And because that is the unique brand proposition when trade unions practice, if you sort of overseas aid, global justice, global solidarity. We don't simply set up an office ourselves. What we do is we work with people on the ground. And I can do no better than mention something that's happening right at the moment across our TV screens, which is the situation regarding Palestine. Union Aid Abroad, AFIDA, has a partner organisation called the Marne Development Centre. Many of you will have seen those TV pictures of the US Air Force dropping aid out of the back of aircraft and it going down in parachutes. Yes, not the most satisfactory way to deliver aid. Union Aid Abroad, AFIDA's partner organisation, Marne Development, was there first, providing support and assistance to all of the people in Gaza who are in a very desperate situation. So that's an immediate way of doing things. But what Union Aid Abroad, AFIDA also does is provide ongoing support for trade union activity, particularly health and safety activity in our near neighbours. In Indonesia, if you travel to Indonesia, a lot of the buildings you stay in will be cheap for a reason, because they have a lot of asbestos in them. And it's trade unionists in Indonesia in partnership with Australian trade unionists that are campaigning to stop that. We take it for granted in Australia. Doesn't happen here. Thank you very much.
So, Maxine, you're going to be next.
Now, I wear multitudes of hats. I wish I had some more heads. One of which is that I'm on the committee of Pax Christi Victoria, which is it's an international Christian movement for peace, obviously. We concern ourselves with environmental matters. Anyway, what I want to plug for anybody who's in Greater Melbourne or Victoria is to come along to a seminar that we're organising to pull together all of us who are interested in all of the issues that we've been speaking about. And the sort of blanket title, working title, is Human Security, Not Military Security. I mean, you don't have to be Einstein to figure out what the government could do if they weren't buying nuclear submarines. Well, I won't dwell on that topic. But anyway, there's to be a roundtable discussion in Melbourne. This will be in person initially to launch this project, which is to draw together all of these issues around peace, environment, justice, all of the issues that we're concerned about, homelessness, all the things in which we have a warped government spending going on. Wednesday, the 24th of April, from 10 to 12:30, that'll be happening in Melbourne. So please spread the word amongst your networks. I put up my email address in the chat because I've come totally unprepared. So, but if you send me an email, I'll put you in touch with the organisation and hope to see some of you there. You don't have to be religious. We're just focusing on religious communities to begin with, but yes, it's much broader than that, obviously. People who care about justice and peace and the environment.
While Phil's mucking around with the computer, I have to dob him in because he's also going to give a 3-minute talk on
housing issues.
On housing issues. Oh, wow. Let's see if you can beat the Greens at this one, Phil. All right. Thank you, everyone. Phil O'Donoghue.
For some of you who've been thank you. For some of you who've been following, I've been working on a program of training for leadership and organising through the Fabians over the past couple of years. Nicole gave a wonderful rendition of the kind of story of self or personal story that makes us connect with somebody who wishes to be a leader. But there's much more to it. But in essence, it's about the importance of bringing about change through people power. And if I look around in our community about those who are missing out on the power that might deliver for them meaningful change in their life, those who miss out most are those who are stuck in the private rental market. Homeowners get to enjoy tax concessions. The value of your home is exempt from assets that are judged for eligibility for the pension and allowances. The inheritance of that capital gains is without taxation, unlike capital gains taxes. Those who invest in properties to profit themselves can actually use the interest on their home loans for that investment property as a write-off against their taxes. Those who are stuck in the private rental market have few rights. Our laws for rental occupants are weak. The tenure of that housing is often very short indeed. At the other end of the scale, we see people in social housing, so that's public housing or community housing. But you know what? They do have some interests to advance their needs. The community housing sector is increasingly powerful. There's a sort of concern about those who are so disadvantaged that they're in public housing. For renters, there's nothing. I think what we need to do is sign up private renters and look at bold initiatives, taxes on vacant properties. Yes. And the revenue from that taxation on private properties going towards improving the rent assistance that's income tested for those on lower incomes. The tenure of private housing. Leases as short as 3 and 6 months. Well, I mean, you don't stop needing a house after 3 and 6 months. We need longer term secure housing as well as more affordable housing. To do that, what we need to do is sign up people, organise and mobilise. Today's Australian newspaper recorded that private renters are the strongest Labor voters of any housing cohort. Mobilise them, make change.
And I think we have one more video left from Jessie.
When we were chatting ahead of this interview, you said you're in a positive mood despite the result. What's made you positive?
Because we've built such a strong movement nationwide, thousands of people who stood by us and continue to stand by us. And all we can do is remain optimistic if we have a strong sense of spirited inclusion going forward.
There's forces present in the democratic process in 2023 that there wasn't there before, certainly not in the 99 referendum. And one key part of that is misinformation. And this is something you flagged very early on.
Absolutely right, yeah.
So was it worse than you thought?
I didn't expect this level of Trumpism to interfere with an Australian sovereign matter. When is it going to be our time to be independent? When is it going to be our time to have matters in our own hands?
ABC reporter Isabella Higgins yesterday spoke about young Indigenous leaders and what this might mean for them. And as a young leader yourself, how do you think it will affect people like yourself in terms of creating change in the future?
This is a calling to younger Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders across the country. This is not the end. This is not closing off. This is opening up a conversation. We are more relevant and more needed in Australian history now than we have ever been. We've got the most important challenges ahead of us, and it's going to take all of us as Australians to work together to find a way forward through that. But what we really need is young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to step up to their place in our society.
Jessie, for a young Indigenous person in Derby, maybe 10, 12 years old, listening to this chat now, what would you say to them?
One day, if this country gets its act together, you can be head of state. You can aspire to be the head of your country. Before, it used to be a fairy tale that some magic princess or prince would one day turn into a king or a queen. If we can get our act together as a country for you, and maybe you'll listen to this now, maybe you'll listen to this in 10 years' time, one day there will be an opportunity for you to lead your nation.
Okay, a very generous response to the outcome of the referendum earlier this year. So do we have a proposed winner for today's event?
Second.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, Save the Owls. How's that going? Can I get a yay from the audience?
Yeah.
I agree with the Owls.
It speaks as well. We're all going to save the owl. So thank you. And remember not to buy second generation rat poison.